Greetings, my like-minded friends. An interesting but troubling thing happened to me recently. I want to share data about SCP-149 with you, and tell you why I'm interested in this object. Detective Void is my pseudonym, of course, but I used to actually be a detective. I retired to focus on studying the SCP Foundation. Imagine my surprise when a commission came to my old email from a previous life, so to speak. I wouldn't have even paid it any mind if it weren't for one very important detail. The letter was addressed to Detective Void. I admit that the client intrigued me, so at my own risk, I agreed to a meeting. Thus began the SCP-149 case. The object is also called the Bloodflies. It belongs to the Keter class and is capable of destroying all of humanity. Several specimens of this species are kept in a Foundation zone, in a special plexiglass container. It's completely sealed except for the safe oxygen supply system. Air combined with a mist of nutrients is supplied to the chamber every 2 hours. By all accounts, SCP-149 specimens are common mosquitoes, except they can carry an anomalous strain of retrovirus. The Foundation calls it SCP-149-A. Retroviruses are pathogens that modify the cells of infected living organisms, causing the cells to produce more of their own kind. HIV is the most well-known of these sorts of viruses. Now imagine that it's also a disease caused by an anomalous agent. My client who sent the letter turned out to be a man with obvious signs of insomnia, paranoia, and other mental disorders. He claimed that he was abducted by a secret organization for strange experiments, and that his memory was wiped afterwards. Among other things, he recalled the horrors in his dreams of the killer mosquitoes that had infested the entire planet. He wanted me to find evidence for this abduction theory of his. So why exactly did I take it upon myself to investigate this case? First, in addition to paranoia, the man had some interesting materials. He brought me a flash drive with secret data from the Foundation. Do you remember what a flash drive is? Second, he was definitely a Foundation employee, or still is one. I'm a pretty good conspiracy theorist, but this guy found me somehow. After he showed up, the most logical thing to do would have been to lay low, but that's not my style. And third, he was interested in an SCP object that I didn't know anything about at the time. Among his data were mostly technical papers about containment areas and other uninformative stuff. There was so much information that I almost gave up digging through it all, until I accidentally found the personal diaries of Foundation employees and some test reports. Among other things, there turned out to be information concerning SCP-149. These were the exact killer mosquitoes that my client had been talking about. The retrovirus named SCP-149-A is found in the saliva of mosquitoes. There's a 50% chance of contracting when bitten. If the pathogen enters the bloodstream, it infects the human cells responsible for regeneration. Through a number of mechanisms, both chemical and anomalous, the virus acts on the cell's nucleus, altering the DNA. Just a few hours after infection, growths similar to cysts appear on the outer walls of the esophagus, as well as inside the sinuses. SCP-149 larvae develop inside them. By the time the body's immune processes begin, the first brood of mosquitoes has had enough time to fully develop. They exit the body through natural openings, like the nostrils and mouth, and sometimes even use the sphenoid sinuses to fly out through the eyes. There's no way to stop an SCP-149-A infection. A fatal outcome always awaits the infected person. In the Foundation's database, I found data on an incident known as 149-1. At the time, the mosquitoes breached containment and infected several D-Class employees at once with the retrovirus. Most of them weren't isolated at the time, and 5 hours later, a swarm of SCP-149 specimens flew out of the victims. The subsequent infestations were so numerous that one of the Foundation's doctors was forced to seal part of the zone off hermetically. All those infected with SCP-149 remained on sublevels 12 to 15. It was impossible to evacuate healthy employees. Such harsh measures helped to avoid contamination of the entire area, and probably an XK class scenario too. This classification refers to the complete or partial extinction of humanity due to a Keter object. Incident 149-1 led to the development of Protocol 42 Charlie. It was personally approved by Member 12 of the O5 Council. The protocol must be initiated every time someone's infected with SCP-149. I didn't manage to get my hands on the documents regarding 42 Charlie, but I presume that this action plan makes the Ethics Committee want to tear their hair out. After studying SCP-149, I started to wonder who my client was. He claimed that experiments were conducted on him, which, in the Foundation, only happens with D-Class employees. The man couldn't be one of them, because D-Class are recruited from prisoners, and they're not exactly released into the wild, so to speak. Given the information on the client's flash drive, he had definitely worked at the Foundation, and had at least a Level 2 security clearance. He was also aware of SCP-149. Based on this, I started digging around in the archives. SCP Foundation personnel photos are rarely attached to their files. so I can't say this with the utmost certainty, but my client is likely Dr. Timothy Burns. He was an on-site medical staff member at the Foundation with level 2 security clearance. They called him Doc Burns, which is even mentioned in his file. The expert graduated medical school with honors, but had a dubious reputation. During his time as a student, he supposedly stole bodies from the local morgue, after which they were found all over the building in various poses. It's known that the Foundation became interested in Burns because he helped capture one of the SCP objects. It remains unknown what kind of object it was, but they say that Doc beat it with a surgical tray. The medic accused the creature of stealing his lunch. The man explained the beating with the words, "The little bastard had to pay." Burns was hired to work at the Foundation. For a long time, he was listed in the medical department of Zone 19, and the doctor also acted as an auxiliary employee. He was regularly sent with agents to places where new objects were discovered, in order to place them in containment. Service at the SCP Foundation didn't particularly change the scientist's character. A number of disciplinary reprimands were issued to him. They tried to get him to stop storing his food in the morgue. But Doc said in response that it's so much colder there. That is, colder than it was in the ordinary kitchen fridge in the break room. Burns also received multiple reprimands for using D-class employees in an inappropriate manner. The doctor, in turn, didn't see what was wrong with his behavior, and he claimed that D-class employees made excellent footstools. Doc is known to have been involved in the initial maintenance of SCP objects numbered 221, 783, and 1450. He worked with SCP-137 in collaboration with Dr. Mann, but most importantly, he was involved with SCP-149. The last time a disciplinary report was filed against Burns, he had come to work under the influence of an unknown substance. It was assumed to be alcohol or some other natural compound, but the scientist's words suggested that he could have used narcotic substances. The scientist started to get rowdy, and he got very upset when he could only name 46 digits of the number pi. They tried to send the doctor home, but he smeared his face with chocolate cake and shouted, with obscenities, that he was Rick James. For those who don't know, he's a famous Black American singer and songwriter. The musician had gotten carried away with drugs and died in 2004. The official punishment for Burns' escapade was his demotion, but I wouldn't be surprised if they just treated the scientist with amnestics and turned him loose in the world. About 10 years have gone by since the drafting of this protocol. With that much time having passed, intrusive memories of his work could have emerged. He most likely witnessed Incident 149-1. The scientist understood that a breach of the bloodfly's containment could lead to a global-scale contagion, and now this memory is coming back to him in his nightmares. Object SCP-149 itself is not really all that fantastic. Similar reproduction mechanisms are found in several known species of parasites. They use their hosts' bodies for nutrition and reproduction. For example, there are ticks, or trombiculidae, who go through 4 stages of development from egg to adult. And by the way, they look bloody too. These critters even infect toads, turtles, quails, and of course people. The eggs hatch into larvae that feed on the cells of their prey. Once on the skin, they release a digestive enzyme that dissolves the cells into a nutritious soup. The parasite crawls under the skin, eats it, and lives under it, causing severe itching, swelling, redness, and rashes. The difference in the reproduction of ticks and that of SCP-149 is that upon having eaten enough to transform into an adult, the trombiculidae larvae falls to the ground. There, it turns into a pupa, from which an adult tick appears subsequently. One peculiarity of SCP-149 is that the mosquitoes don't bring their eggs directly into the host's blood, but a virus instead. It's quite possible that the blood flies were created by humans during experiments with anomalous subjects. The object could have been developed as a way to destroy humanity. Mosquitoes remain the cause for the largest numbers of death, as they carry a multitude of difficult-to-treat diseases. As for my client, the man was probably a Foundation employee and was treated with amnestics after his dismissal. But this doesn't explain how he found me. I've long suspected that I'm closely being surveilled by Foundation agents. They may have well used their former employee to lure me out. But that still leaves the question, why didn't the operations take any action when I met with my client? In any case, an ordinary person couldn't get the data that Doc brought me on the flash drive, and no civilian would be able to figure out my email address, that's for sure. I'll have to think about this later, but for now, let's get back to SCP-149. This object seems ordinary, but to me, it's pretty creepy. The bloodflies are small and quite terrestrial, but they will easily kill you. But before that happens, their victim will become an incubator for an entire army of new SCPs. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate SCP-149's creepiness? Share your thoughts in the comments down below. And don't skimp on the likes, because hey, you're my best viewers. See you in the next video.